Imagine sleeping in a castle where stone walls steal every ounce of heat, where the wind howls through narrow windows, and every night is a battle against freezing floors and icy drafts. How did nobles, guards, and servants survive the coldest nights without modern heating, blankets, or warm beds? Tonight, we unravel the secrets of medieval castles and show how humans endured the relentless winter, one breath, one layer, one shared body at a time. Hi guys, tonight we will talk about how did people sleep in medieval castles. Without freezing to death before start, please like and subscribe my channel Sleepsy, and also let men know in the comment your country name and what it is the time for you. It always fascinated to join us all over the world. Now dim the light, take a deep breath, and let's start our journey tonight. As the sun slipped behind the horizon, the castle began to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but slowly, like a breath being held. Stone towers that looked powerful in daylight now turned dark and silent. Shadows stretched across the walls, growing longer with every passing moment. The sky dimmed from gold to gray, then to deep blue, and finally to black. Night had arrived. The castle gates closed with a heavy sound, wood against iron, iron against stone. That sound meant safety from enemies, but it also meant something else. Once the gates shut, no warmth was coming in. Whatever heat remained inside had to last the night. Silence followed, a deep, heavy silence. There were no streetlights to soften the dark, no glowing windows in the distance, no electricity humming quietly in the background. When night fell in a medieval castle, darkness was complete, absolute, crushing. Only torches flickered, their flames weak against the vast stone corridors, their light barely touching the corners of high ceilings. Shadows danced on the walls, making the castle feel alive, breathing, watching, waiting. And the cold was already there. The stone walls had absorbed the chill of the day, thick, heavy, unforgiving. Stone did not forget the cold. It held onto it tightly, releasing it slowly as the night deepened. Even before sleep began, the cold had already claimed the rooms. Wind whispered through arrow slits, a low, constant sound, never loud, never quiet. It slipped through cracks and shutters. It crawled under doors. It moved along corridors like an unseen guest. The castle was strong against armies, but helpless against the night air. People moved quickly now. Servants hurried to finish their tasks before darkness fully settled. Guards pulled their cloaks tighter as they took their positions along the walls. Nobles retreated from great halls into private chambers that offered little comfort beyond privacy. Everyone knew what was coming. Night in a medieval castle was not a time of rest. It was a test. As fires were fed one last time, everyone understood the rules. Wood was precious. Flames could not burn endlessly. Fires would be allowed to die down. Embers would glow faintly, and cold would return, stronger than before. Stone floors radiated chill upward. Cold air sank low, crawling along the ground, wrapping itself around ankles and legs. Every step felt colder than the last. Every breath felt heavier. Candles were lit sparingly. Wax was not wasted. Light was luxury. Darkness ruled most spaces, leaving rooms half seen and half imagined. The mind filled the shadows with fears, sounds, and memories. Outside the walls, the world froze quietly. Frost formed on grass. Wind cut across empty fields. Wolves moved in the distance, unseen but heard. Inside the castle, safety existed, but comfort did not. Nights stretched longer in winter, much longer. Hours of darkness with no distraction, no screens, no clocks glowing softly. Only the slow passage of time measured by breath, flame, and shivering bodies. People began preparing for sleep, not because they were tired, but because there was nowhere else to go. Movement burned energy. Energy meant warmth, and warmth had to be saved. Doors were closed. Shutters were pulled tight. Tapestries were pressed flat against stone walls. Every small action was an attempt to hold on to heat just a little longer. Yet, even with all this effort, the cold crept in. Fingers stiffened, toes numbed, noses burned. Breath fogged the air inside, rooms meant for nobles and servants alike. No one escaped the cold, not even kings. This was the reality no storybooks talk about. Castles were symbols of power, but at night, they became cold stone traps. Beautiful, impressive, and merciless. As people lay down to sleep, wrapped in layers of cloth and hope, a question lingered in every silent chamber. How do you survive a night like this? How do you sleep when the walls themselves feel frozen? How do you make it to morning without freezing to death? This question shaped everything that followed. It shaped the beds people slept in, the clothes they never removed, the fires they guarded carefully, the way they slept together, the way they endured. Night had fallen on the medieval castle, and survival had just begun. The cold inside a medieval castle was not an accident. It was built into the walls. Castles were never designed for comfort. They were designed for war. Every stone, every tower, every narrow opening had one purpose: defense. Warmth was never part of the plan. The walls were thick, sometimes 10 feet thick. They looked powerful. They felt unbreakable. But stone does not behave like wood or brick. Stone absorbs cold slowly and then holds it for a very long time. During the day, winter air pressed against the walls. At night, that cold moved inward. It crept through layers of stone, settling into rooms and corridors. Even if the sun shone briefly, the warmth never reached the interior. The castle remained cold, day and night. And then there was dampness. Castles were often built on hills, near rivers, or on exposed land. Moist air clung to the stone. Rain soaked into walls. Snow melted and refroze. Water lived inside the stone itself. Damp cold is different. It feels heavier. It sinks deeper. Rooms smelled of moisture. Walls felt wet to the touch. Clothing never fully dried. Blankets stayed slightly damp. This kind of cold did not just chill the body, it weakened it. Drafts were everywhere. Arrow slits, meant for archers, acted like funnels for wind. Cracks in stone allowed air to slip through freely. Wooden shutters warped with age, leaving gaps that whistled softly all night. No matter how well doors were closed, the castle breathed. Cold air entered, warm air escaped, always. Castles also sat high and exposed. Hills caught the wind. Towers rose above trees and buildings. Wind slammed into walls from every direction. At night, when temperatures dropped, the wind turned brutal. The higher the room, the colder it became. And most sleeping chambers were high. Castles were built upward for safety. Nobles slept far above the ground, away from attackers. But height brought exposure. Wind wrapped around towers, stripping away warmth. Bedrooms became cold boxes of stone and air. Winter nights lasted longer than daylight, sometimes much longer. Fires burned during the day, but at night, fuel had to be saved. Flames were reduced. Embers glowed faintly. Heat vanished quickly. There was no way to heat the entire castle. No system. No pipes, no insulation hidden inside walls. Once a fire died down, cold rushed in to claim the space. People accepted this as normal. Cold was not considered an emergency. It was not something to escape. It was part of life. Everyone grew up knowing it. Children learned early how to endure it. Complaining changed nothing. The castle was cold because the world was cold. Survival depended on adaptation, not comfort. People layered clothing, They modified sleeping habits. They shared space. They learned where warmth lingered and where it vanished fastest. Castles offered protection from enemies, but not from winter. And yet, people lived here. They slept here. They survived here. Not because castles were warm, but because humans learned how to work around the cold, not fight it. The cold became predictable. It followed patterns. And once you understood those patterns, you could survive the night. But first, you had to face the enemy head on. The stone, the wind, the night itself. The enemy was not always visible, but it was always present. In a medieval castle, the cold did not arrive suddenly. It crept in, quietly, patiently, like a living thing that knew the layout better than any human. Stone walls rose high and thick, but they offered no comfort at night. By sunset, they were already cold to the touch. As darkness deepened, that cold began to move, slowly, relentlessly. It seeped inward, spreading through rooms and corridors. People felt it first in their feet. Stone floors were bare, no carpets in most spaces, no insulation beneath. Cold air settled low, pressing against ankle and legs. Standing still became painful. Walking only delayed the numbness. Wind found every weakness. It whistled through arrow slits carved into walls for defense. It slipped through cracks where stones had shifted over time. It pushed against wooden shutters that no longer sealed properly. Even heavy doors could not stop it completely. At night, the wind grew bolder. It howled along towers. It wrapped itself around battlements. It forced cold air deep into the castle's bones. In narrow corridors, it created soft moaning sounds that echoed endlessly, unsettling anyone who listened too long. Moisture made everything worse. Rain soaked the stone during the day. Snow melted slowly, seeping into walls and floors. As night fell, that moisture turned icy. Damp air clung to skin and clothing, stealing warmth with every breath. Damp cold is unforgiving. It chills deeper. It lasts longer. It weakens the body faster. Bed sheets felt cold before anyone touched them. Clothing stiffened slightly. Blankets never fully warmed. Even fire could not chase dampness away. The castle often became colder inside than outside. Stone stored cold efficiently. Once chilled, it released that cold steadily through the night. Outside, the air could change. Inside, the stone remained frozen in time. People learned this quickly. They avoided certain rooms at night. They chose sleeping spaces carefully. Lower rooms stayed colder longer. Higher rooms caught more wind. Corners were avoided. Spaces near fireplaces were prized. Still, no place was truly warm. The night was long. Winter nights stretched endlessly. Without clocks, time moved slowly. Darkness felt heavier with each hour. Sleep came in fragments, broken by shivering noise or duty. Stillness was dangerous. To stop moving was to lose warmth. Guards paced slowly to keep blood flowing. Servants shifted positions while resting. Even sleepers changed posture often, pulling blankets tighter, curling inward. Every breath mattered. Breathing slowly conserved heat. Exhaling too deeply filled the air with fog, reminding everyone how cold it truly was. People pulled cloth over their mouths to trap warmth. The castle was alive at night, not with comfort, but with endurance. Walls creaked as temperatures dropped. Wood contracted. Stone groaned softly. The structure reacted to the cold just as humans did. Night turned the castle into a test of survival. No matter who you were, noble, servant, guard, the cold did not care. Titles meant nothing. Stone treated everyone the same. And yet, people adapted. They learned how to use the castle against itself. Where to hide from wind, how to trap heat, how to sleep in a world built of cold stone. But before comfort could be found, one truth had to be accepted. The night was the enemy, and survival meant learning its rules. Fire was hope. Fire was comfort. Fire was never enough. In a medieval castle, the fireplace was the heart of warmth. Large, open, always visible, flames danced against stone, casting shadows that made the walls feel alive. For a moment, it felt safe, but fire had limits. Most fireplaces were built into thick stone walls. Heat was swallowed quickly. The warmth stayed close to the flames, fading just a few steps away. Stand near the fire, and your face burned. Step back, and cold claimed you again. Castles were too big to heat. Great halls swallowed warmth like a void. High ceilings let heat rise and vanish. Stone walls absorbed fire's energy without giving much back. Fires worked hard, but the castle worked harder. Smoke was constant. Without modern chimneys, smoke drifted freely through rooms. It burned eyes, it filled lungs, it clung to clothing and hair. Breathing near the fire was often uncomfortable, but stepping away meant freezing. People learned where to sit. Benches closest to the hearth were prized. Spots were claimed early. Servants, guards, and nobles all knew the invisible lines where warmth ended. Crossing those lines meant cold. At night, fires were reduced. Wood was valuable. Firewood had to last the entire winter. Burning a fire all night was wasteful and dangerous. Sparks could ignite straw, tapestries, or bedding. Many fires were allowed to die down intentionally. Embers glowed faintly in the dark. That glow was enough to keep the fire alive, but not enough to heat a room. Warmth faded quickly once flames disappeared. Stone reclaimed the space. Fire did not follow you to bed. Bedrooms were often far from fireplaces. Heat never traveled through corridors. By the time someone reached their chamber, the warmth they carried was already gone. Even in rooms with fireplaces, fires were small. Bedrooms were heated briefly before sleep, if at all. Once people lay down, fires were left to fade. Safety mattered more than comfort. Fire provided light. Torches and candles relied on flame. Without fire, darkness ruled. People used fire to see, to work, to feel less alone. The glow itself was reassuring, even when it failed to warm. Fire also offered protection against animals, against fear, against the unknown sounds of the night. But fire could not fight stone forever. As the night deepened, rooms cooled rapidly. Breath fogged the air. Fingers stiffened. Fire's influence became memory rather than reality. People planned around this. They warmed themselves before bed. They layered clothing. They prepared beds carefully. Fire was used as a starting point, not a solution. Fire was a companion, not a shield. And when the embers dimmed, the real work of survival began. The safest rooms were often the coldest. In medieval castles, bedrooms were placed high above the ground. This kept nobles and important figures away from attackers. Height meant security, but height also meant exposure. Wind wrapped around towers endlessly. It struck stone from all sides. At night, when temperatures dropped, that wind turned cruel. Every breath outside the walls seemed to press inward. Bedchambers were small, narrow, spare. Furniture was minimal: a bed, a chest, sometimes a chair. Stone walls remained bare unless tapestries were added later. Decoration was rare. Practicality ruled. The floors were stone. Cold settled there first. It climbed upward, inch by inch, wrapping itself around sleepers from below. No matter how many blankets lay on top, cold rose relentlessly from the ground. Windows were tiny, small openings cut into thick walls. They were necessary for defense, but terrible for warmth. Wooden shutters covered them at night. yet gaps remained. Glass was rare and thin. Cold air slipped through easily. Heavy doors offered little protection. Wood contracted in winter. Gaps formed. Drafts pushed through. Even closed doors breathed cold air quietly into rooms. Fireplaces were uncommon in bedchambers. When they existed, they were small. Fires were lit briefly, then allowed to die. Leaving a fire unattended was dangerous. Bedding, tapestries, and wooden beams could ignite. As night deepened, warmth vanished. People climbed into bed already cold. They did not expect comfort. Sleep was not a reward. It was a necessity. Beds were positioned carefully, never near windows, never near corners, never against bare stone. Every placement mattered. One mistake could mean a night of suffering. Noise echoed easily. Wind rattled shutters. Stone creaked as temperatures dropped. Sounds traveled through thick walls, amplified by silence. Every sound reminded sleepers how exposed they truly were. These rooms felt isolated, high above the ground, separated from warmth, surrounded by stone. Yet people slept here every night. They endured because they had learned how. Bedchambers were not meant to feel warm. They were meant to keep you alive. And survival required strategy. The bed itself became the battlefield. The bed was not about comfort. It was about survival. In a medieval castle, the bed was the warmest place in the room. Not because it was soft, not because it was luxurious, but because it was designed to fight the cold. Beds were built high off the ground. This was not decoration. Cold air stayed low, hugging stone floors. By lifting the bed, sleepers escaped the worst of it. Even a few feet made a difference on freezing nights. Wooden frames were thick and heavy. They blocked drafts. They acted as barriers between the body and the cold room. Unlike stone, wood did not steal heat as quickly. It held warmth just long enough to matter. Mattresses were practical. Straw-filled sacks were common. Feathers and wool were used by those who could afford them. These materials trapped air. Air meant insulation. Insulation meant survival. Softness was secondary, warmth was everything. The bed became a heat trap. Bodies warmed the space slowly. Blankets and curtains held that warmth inside. Over time, the bed formed its own microclimate. Slightly warmer, slightly safer than the room beyond. People climbed into bed early, not because they were tired, but because standing still meant freezing. Once inside, movement was limited. Stillness conserved heat. Sleep came in waves, broken by the cold, then pulled back by exhaustion. Beds were shared, one bed, multiple bodies, shared warmth. Privacy mattered less than survival. Children, spouses, attendants, everyone contributed heat. The bed was also protection against drafts, against fear, against the endless cold of stone walls. Even nobles depended on it. Despite wealth and status, the night treated everyone the same. No title could warm stone. No crown could stop the wind. The bed was the great equalizer. People prepared their beds carefully. Blankets were layered, furs were placed on top. Straw was adjusted underneath. Every night followed a ritual of preparation, because mistakes were punished by the cold. Once inside, people stayed inside. Leaving the bed meant losing precious warmth. Getting back inside meant starting over. Sleep was guarded fiercely. The bed was not luxury. It was shelter within shelter. A small wooden island in a sea of cold stone. And yet, even the bed had one final defense: curtains. The real warmth was not in the fire, it was in the curtains. Four-poster beds were not built for beauty. They were built for survival. Tall wooden posts rose at each corner, supporting heavy fabric that could be pulled closed at night. These curtains changed everything. When drawn, they created a room within a room, a small enclosed space where cold air struggled to enter. The rest of the bedchamber could freeze, but inside the curtains, warmth could survive. Stone walls were pushed away, drafts were blocked, wind was slowed, cold air was trapped outside. Inside the curtains, body heat gathered slowly. Breath warmed the space, blankets held it in. Over time, the bed became the warmest place in the castle. The curtains were thick, wool, heavy cloth, sometimes layered. These materials absorbed sound and blocked airflow. Even a small gap mattered, so curtains were tucked carefully. People learned how to use them properly. Curtains were pulled tight before sleep. Openings were sealed. Edges were weighed down with fabric or tucked under bedding. This was not decoration, it was technique. Privacy was a bonus. Warmth was the real reward. In a world without insulation, curtains were insulation. They stopped the constant movement of air that stole heat all night long. Not everyone had them. Curtain beds were expensive. Nobles had them. Wealthy households prioritized them. Servants and guards slept without such protection, relying on clothing and shared warmth instead. But wherever curtains existed, they mattered. People noticed the difference immediately. Nights were less brutal, sleep lasted longer, bodies recovered better. Illness became slightly less likely. The air inside the curtains smelled different, warm, heavy, human. Outside, the room remained cold and silent. Inside, life continued quietly. People rarely opened the curtains during the night. Once warmth was trapped, it was guarded fiercely. Opening the curtains meant letting cold rush in like water breaking through a dam. Even in summer, curtains remained useful. They blocked insects. They softened noise. They created personal space. But in winter, they became essential. Curtains turned beds into shelters. They were walls of cloth in a stone world. They were warmth made visible. And when curtains closed, the night lost a little of its power. Warmth came in layers. The more weight you felt, the safer you were. In medieval castles, bedding was not chosen for softness. It was chosen for how well it could trap heat. Blankets and furs were stacked carefully, night after night, creating a barrier between the body and the cold. Wool was everywhere. Wool held warmth even when damp. It trapped air between fibers. It was heavy, rough, and incredibly effective. Most blankets were made from thick wool, woven tightly to block cold air. Furs were prized. Animal skins added another layer of protection. Fur faced inward, trapping heat close to the body. Leather faced outward, blocking drafts. These were not decorations. They were survival tools. People slept under weight. The pressure of layered blankets helped trap warm air. Light coverings were useless. Heavy bedding mattered. The bed became a cocoon of fabric and fur. Linen had limits. Linen was common for sheets, but it offered almost no insulation. In winter, linen alone meant suffering. It existed only as a base layer, never as protection. Layers were adjusted constantly. As the night grew colder, blankets were pulled tighter. Extra furs were added. Edges were tucked under bodies to seal warmth inside. Every movement was slow, deliberate, and necessary. Bedding reflected status. Nobles had more layers, better wool, thicker furs. Servants made do with fewer blankets and thinner protection. But no one escaped the cold entirely. Sharing helped. 2 people under one stack of blankets stayed warmer than one alone. Families and attendants often slept together for this reason. Heat was shared freely. Bedding was cared for carefully. Blankets were aired when possible. Furs were brushed. Wet bedding was dried near fires during the day. A single damp blanket could ruin a night, and smell was part of warmth. Wool, fur, smoke, and human scent mixed together. The smell meant safety. It meant heat had been trapped long enough to matter. As the night deepened, blankets became heavier. not physically, but in importance. They were the last line of defense against the cold stone walls waiting just beyond. And still, many slept wearing their clothes, because even the thickest blankets were not always enough. In a medieval castle, clothes were not just for the day, they were for survival. Night did not mean undressing, it meant layering. The moment you lay down, you were surrounded by cold stone, creeping drafts, and the relentless wind outside. Removing clothes would be foolish, dangerous even. People slept fully dressed. Wool tunics, heavy socks, caps over their heads, belts loosened but rarely removed. Every garment added a layer of warmth, creating a personal barrier between body and cold. One missing layer could make a night unbearable. Even nobles wore multiple layers. Luxury did not mean warmth was guaranteed. A king's bed might have furs, blankets, and curtains. But without clothes, the cold still found him. Status could buy comfort, but it could not replace protection. Servants and guards relied even more on clothing. Their bedding was thinner, their rooms were colder. Heat was shared, yes, but their own garments were the most reliable shield. Sleeping dressed was a necessity, not a choice. Children learned early. From the moment they could walk, they learned to sleep with wool on, to huddle close, to keep blankets tight around them. Being cold was not an option. It could weaken them, make them sick, even kill. People adapted their sleeping posture. Bodies curled inward, holding warmth close. Hands and feet were tucked beneath layers. Caps covered heads. Every motion conserved heat. Sleep was not just rest. It was a battle against the cold. Even the wealthy often left clothes on top of blankets. Layers created a sandwich of warmth. Clothes next to skin, blankets above, furs on top. Each layer trapped the heat of the one below. Body heat became a currency. Every person contributed. The cold shaped habits beyond the bed. People avoided long periods of stillness before sleep. They warmed themselves near the fire. They kept blankets ready. They prepared garments carefully. Every night was a ritual of preparation, because mistakes were punished by frost. Sleeping fully dressed was also about endurance. It was training. It was practice. It taught the body to survive, to adapt, to conserve energy while staying alive. Modern comfort had no equivalent. Then, survival was the measure of success. And yet, people slept. They slept fully dressed, layered, tucked, careful. They surrendered to exhaustion, knowing every garment and blanket worked together to hold them against the night. In a castle built of stone, in rooms full of drafts, in chambers echoing the wind, clothing was more than cloth. It was armor. It was survival. It was warmth. Warmth was precious, so precious that it was shared. In a medieval castle, sleeping alone was dangerous. Stone floors, cold walls, and endless drafts offered no mercy. Heat had to be multiplied, and the simplest way to do it was people huddling together. Entire families often slept in a single bed. Nobles, children, and attendants, sometimes even servants, shared a single space. Each body added warmth. Every breath contributed to survival. Privacy was sacrificed for comfort. Survival came first. Shared warmth worked like magic. 2 bodies under blankets retained more heat than one. 3 bodies, warmer still. The more people, the less the cold could invade. A single bed became a human furnace, a living shield against freezing stone and biting wind. Even guards and soldiers practiced it. During winter, guards rotated shifts in cold towers. When off duty, they sometimes shared beds to recover. Every body mattered. Every source of heat counted. Survival was about numbers as much as blankets and clothing. Children learned to huddle instinctively. They curled against parents. They tucked arms and legs close. The warmest spot in the castle wasn't by the fire. It was in a cluster of bodies, breathing together, hearts beating together, fighting the night as one. Sleeping fully dressed enhanced the effect. Layered clothing, combined with blankets and shared bodies, created a heat trap. Pulling someone close could mean the difference between shivering all night and maintaining enough warmth to survive until dawn. Even nobles sacrificed privacy. Curtains on the bed offered space, yes, but inside, multiple people often slept side by side. In winter, survival outweighed modesty. The cold did not care about status, rank, or etiquette. Noise faded. In these crowded beds, only soft breathing could be heard. The wind howled outside. Stone groaned. Fires died. But inside the bed, warmth created a quiet fortress. Sleep came in broken waves, interrupted by movement, comforted by proximity. Shared warmth extended beyond family. Servants sometimes slept near masters, not as a privilege, but as necessity. Their heat helped keep the noble alive. The noble's warmth, in return, added to theirs. Together, the group fought the cold. Even strangers could become temporary allies. During harsh winters or siege nights, villagers or travelers inside castle walls sometimes shared beds. It was survival, not choice. Every extra body was an asset. Every breath counted. Humans became heaters. Stone walls could not be moved. Fires could not reach every corner. Blankets could only trap so much heat. But human bodies? They adapted. They generated warmth naturally. They multiplied it when close together. Night after night, people learned the rhythm. Huddle, curl, share, layer, breathe slowly. Every movement was deliberate. Every connection mattered. Cold was relentless, but so was the human will to survive. In a world without central heating, shared warmth was a secret weapon. It was simple. It was human. It was life-saving. Stone is beautiful. Stone is strong. Stone is deadly in winter. A medieval castle could withstand armies, but it could not fight cold. The walls held heat like a sponge holds water, absorbing it, then releasing it slowly, leaving rooms frozen long after the sun had set. That is where tapestries came in, thick, heavy fabrics hung from walls, often colorful, decorated with scenes of hunts, battles, or noble life. These tapestries served more than decoration. They were survival tools. Every layer of cloth trapped a little warmth, softened a little draft, and held back the chill that the stone walls relentlessly sent inward. Rugs were placed on floors. Stone floors radiated cold into feet, ankles, and legs. A simple wooden floor would do little, but a rug, especially one woven from wool, created a buffer. Each step, each movement across soft fibers, kept the body from touching freezing stone directly. Even small details mattered. Straw or rushes might be scattered on floors, adding another layer of insulation. Chairs and benches could be lined with cloth. Every surface had a role to play in the quiet war against winter. Tapestries softened more than the cold. They muffled noise. Wind whistling through narrow windows sounded less terrifying when walls were lined with a heavy fabric. The castle became less echoing, less harsh, less frightening. Sound and warmth were intertwined. Placement was key. Walls facing prevailing winds received the thickest coverings. Corners, where cold air pooled, were reinforced with extra layers. People learned the patterns of drafts, the flow of wind, and placed every piece of cloth to fight it. Even furniture worked for warmth. Chests could be used to block drafts under windows. Benches could be positioned near walls covered in tapestries. Every object became part of a network, designed to slow down the cold's advance. Decorative or functional. In a medieval castle, decoration often became function. What looked like art or wealth often had a practical survival purpose. Beauty and warmth went hand in hand. People slept surrounded by these barriers, curtains around the bed, blankets piled high, rugs beneath their feet, tapestries along the walls. Every barrier mattered. Every layer was a line of defense. Stone walls still claimed much of the cold, but human ingenuity, combined with these soft barriers, created islands of relative warmth. They made nights survivable, they made sleep possible, and sometimes warmth meant the difference between life and death. In castles built to withstand siege, humans had learned to survive their greatest enemy, the night itself. Not everyone in a castle slept in comfort. In fact, most did not. While nobles had curtained beds, furs, blankets, and heated chambers, servants and guards faced a harsher reality. Their rooms were small, cold, and often shared with animals, equipment, or other people. Every night was a test of endurance. Guards slept near walls and gates. Their purpose was protection. Staying alert was more important than warmth. Stone floors, thin blankets, and constant drafts were their companions. When snow and wind attacked from outside, guards felt it first. Every shiver reminded them that danger was not just outside, it was in the cold itself. Servants slept in hallways or storage rooms. These were the spaces left over, often near kitchens, stables, or utility areas. Fires were distant, blankets were thin, floors were stone or packed dirt. Nights were long. They moved constantly to stay warm, curling into themselves, hugging each other, and layering clothing like armor. Sleeping arrangements were practical, not private. One bed could hold several people. Families huddled together. Co-workers shared warmth. Extra bodies were precious commodities. Every human heat source counted. The cold did not discriminate. It struck the rich and the poor alike, but those with less had fewer defenses. Shifts and rotation were key. Guards could not sleep continuously. They paced towers and corridors, patrolled walls, or tended to fires. Their short rest periods were often broken by duty. Cold became constant. Only movement could stave it off. Stillness meant frost creeping into toes and fingers. Survival demanded adaptation. Servants learned early to layer clothing. Wool tunics, socks, hats, belts, all stayed on through the night. Blankets and furs were distributed strategically. Every layer mattered. Every small heat source mattered. Even a single ember or a warm floorboard became vital. Animals sometimes helped. Cows, pigs, or dogs in nearby rooms gave off warmth. Servants and guards huddled close, letting body heat mix. It was not clean or comfortable. It was survival. Smell, noise, and disease risks were ignored. The cold dictated priorities. Noise and shadow were constant companions. Corridors echoed, wood groaned, stone walls contracted. The wind whispered like a ghost. Sleep was broken, light, and shallow. Cold made stillness dangerous. Movement was a weapon, even in rest. Yet these people endured. They adapted to every draft, every hard stone floor, every long night. Cold was relentless, but humans were relentless too. Strategies, routines, and human warmth kept them alive through the harshest months. Survival was communal. Every shared blanket, every close body, every careful layering was part of a silent pact. Alone, frost could claim you quickly. Together, warmth multiplied. Even in the coldest spaces, humans found a way to fight the night. In a castle built for defense, the real battle was against the cold. For servants and guards, this battle never ended. It shaped every night, every breath, every movement. And in the darkest, coldest hours, endurance became their greatest weapon. In a castle, the night never truly slept, and neither did some of its people. Guards walked the corridors, patrolled battlements, and watch gates while darkness pressed against the stone walls. Their bodies were the first shield against attack, but also the first source of heat in freezing towers and cold chambers. Movement became survival. Standing still was dangerous. Shivering allowed cold to creep in. Blood slowed, fingers stiffened. To stay warm, guards paced, shifted weight, and stretched. Every step was a tiny fight against frostbite, every turn a reclaiming of lost warmth. Fires were tended carefully. Night was long, fuel was precious, and embers could die quickly. Guards and servants often stirred quietly to feed the flames, ensuring at least a small island of heat survived. One ember could keep a single corner from freezing. That ember was precious. Sleeping was broken and irregular. Duty dictated waking cycles. A guard might rest briefly, rise, patrol again, return to sleep for a short hour. The cold made deep sleep dangerous. Shallow sleep meant awareness. Awareness meant life. Warmth was found in unexpected ways. Sometimes it was body heat from a fellow sleeper. Sometimes it was the faint glow of an ember. Sometimes it was a rhythmic walk along a corridor, boots against stone, breath clouding the air, keeping life moving inside frozen walls. Night was both enemy and teacher. It taught patience. It taught strategy. It taught the limits of human endurance. Guards learned how long they could remain still, when to walk, when to move quietly, and how to conserve energy without surrendering warmth. Rotation of duties mattered. 2 guards might alternate every few hours, ensuring that someone was always awake, always moving. Even short stints of activity restored warmth temporarily. Exhaustion and cold were constant threats, but together, humans created the rhythm that kept frost at bay. Even small tasks became sources of heat. Checking windows, adjusting shutters, carrying firewood, stirring coals. Each motion generated warmth. Each action was a survival tactic disguised as routine. The cold shaped behavior in ways invisible during the day. By night's deepest hours, silence was rare. Soft footsteps, whispered instructions, shuffling blankets. Even breathing carried weight. The castle was alive, not with comfort, but with the careful orchestration of heat. Sleep returned slowly and often briefly. Humans had to be ready for any disturbance. Wind gusting through arrow slits, embers dying too fast, doors rattling. Alertness was part of warmth. Stillness was risk. Movement was life. Night in the castle was a constant dance. A dance between stone, wind, fire, and body heat. Between exhaustion and survival. Between shivering and fleeting warmth. Humans learned to move, to pace, to endure. Because in winter, even a castle could freeze without mercy. By the time dawn arrived, those who survived night watches had not just endured, they had mastered it. Winter was not just cold, it was dangerous. Even inside thick stone walls, illness thrived. Damp floors, freezing rooms, and heavy drafts made bodies vulnerable. Every cough, every shiver, every night spent half awake increased the risk. Hypothermia, frostbite, and respiratory infections were constant threats. The weak suffered first. Children, elderly, and the sick were most at risk. They could not generate enough warmth on their own. Shared beds and layers helped, but sometimes it was not enough. A single cold night could bring a fever, a cough, or worse. Death was not uncommon. People understood it. It was part of life, a harsh reality. In winter, survival required acceptance. Bodies could fail even when care and caution were applied. The castle was safe from enemies, but not from nature itself. Burials were difficult. Frosted ground made graves hard to dig. Winter storms slowed the process. Sometimes bodies had to be stored until conditions allowed burial. It was uncomfortable. It was grim, But it was life, and life demanded endurance. Disease spread quickly. Crowded rooms, shared bedding, and damp conditions were perfect breeding grounds. Even those careful with warmth and movement could be infected. The castle was a fortress, but inside, germs found easy paths. Survival required vigilance. Yet, people adapted. They layered blankets. They wore clothes constantly. They used fire and movement strategically. Shared warmth and care became weapons against illness. Every precaution increased their odds, even when nothing could fully prevent tragedy. Hope was as vital as heat. Stories were told around fading embers. Prayers were whispered in dark corridors. Small comforts, a warm drink, a soft word, a shared blanket, were remembered more than the stone walls themselves. Survival depended on both body and spirit. The harshest nights shaped human behavior. People learned patience. They valued cooperation. They respected the dangers they could not see. Each winter taught lessons: how to move, how to layer, how to endure. Knowledge became protection. Even in the face of death, life continued. Guards watched, servants worked. Nobles slept under layers of blankets and furs. Meals were shared, fires were tended. Even when tragedy struck, the routines of survival persisted. Winter could not stop life completely. Cold, sickness, and mortality were teachers. They demanded respect. They demanded strategy. They demanded human ingenuity. And in those frozen chambers, people became resilient beyond imagination. In the castle, winter was merciless, but it also revealed the extraordinary lengths humans would go to survive. The sun had disappeared behind the hills, leaving the castle wrapped in gray and black. Stone towers stood tall, silent, and cold. The gates were closed, torches flickered. The wind whispered through arrow slits like a restless ghost. Inside, life continued quietly, but with purpose. In one small bedchamber high above the great hall, a noble family prepared for night. Blankets were layered, furs spread over straw mattresses. Curtains were drawn tightly around the four-poster bed, creating a small island of warmth in the frozen room. A child curled into the side of their parent. Body heat shared instinctively. The noble pulled the top furs tighter, wrapping them both in protection. Outside, stone walls radiated chill. Inside, warmth lingered, fragile but alive. Down the hall, a servant huddled in a narrow chamber. Their bed was thin, blankets fewer, and no curtains offered protection. They wore wool tunics and socks, caps pulled low, curling tightly to conserve heat. Every movement, a small battle against numb fingers and cold floors. In the gatehouse, a guard paced silently. Stone beneath their boots was icy. Wind howled through cracks. Yet with every step, warmth built in their legs, chest, and back. Their night was one of vigilance, broken sleep, and constant motion. Stillness meant frost. Movement meant survival. In the great hall, a dying ember glowed faintly in the fireplace. Its warmth barely touched the ceiling, yet it gave life to the room. Servants stoked it carefully, making sure it survived long enough to keep part of the hall warm. Every ember mattered. One spark could mean comfort. One missed log could mean freezing fingers. The night stretched endlessly. Each hour was measured in breaths, in the shiver of stone, in the closeness of bodies. Time passed slowly, shadows lengthened, the wind pressed against the walls relentlessly. Even the sound of your own heartbeat seemed amplified in the silence. Sleep came in fragments. In bedchambers, nobles drifted between dozing and wakefulness. Children stirred, servants shifted, guards walked quietly. Each movement preserved warmth, each shiver reminded them of the stakes. Deep sleep was a luxury no one could afford entirely. The castle breathed with cold and life. Stone groaned as temperatures dropped. Wood contracted in protest. Wind whistled through towers. Doors rattled. Every sound was part of the rhythm of survival. The night was long, but life persisted. By midnight, strategies were fully in motion. Bodies were close, blankets layered, furs shifted. Embers glowed faintly, protected by careful tending. Guards paced steadily, motion providing heat to muscles and keeping minds alert. Servants huddled, whispering stories or prayers to distract from the cold. Morning seemed far away. And yet, slowly, the first hint of light appeared. A pale glow over the hills. A promise that the night, with all its trials, would end. The castle, still cold and silent, had survived another winter night. In that silence, humans had won small victories. They had survived the cold stone, the endless wind, the icy floors, and the relentless dark. They had preserved warmth, life, and hope. In the process, they had mastered survival, not through magic, not through comfort, but through body, mind, and the careful art of enduring the night. A single winter night in a castle was more than darkness. It was a story of life clinging to life, of warmth shared and preserved, of courage found in small, ordinary acts, and of humans learning to survive in the coldest, harshest places imaginable. When the night ended and the first pale light touched the towers, warmth returned slowly. But it was not just fire or blankets that mattered. Medieval castles teach us something we often forget. Warmth was earned. It was a strategy. It was effort, planning, and human ingenuity. Stone walls could not be changed. Fires could not reach every corner. Blankets alone were not enough. Survival demanded layering, sharing, movement, and care. We have forgotten this today. Modern life gives us warmth at the push of a button. Central heating, insulated walls, and soft beds make it easy to ignore what humans endured for centuries. But in those cold stone towers, warmth was life. Losing it could mean illness, frostbite, or death. Every ember, every layer of wool, every shared breath mattered. Humans became creative in the face of adversity. They learned to share heat through body, bed, and blanket. They lined walls with tapestries, covered floors with rugs, and huddled near fires. Every action was deliberate. Every habit preserved warmth. In a world of endless cold, humans were the heaters. Their ingenuity made stone livable, dark nights bearable, and survival possible. Cold-shaped behavior, family bonds, and community. Shared beds, shared blankets, shared effort. It was not just about comfort, it was about life. Isolation was deadly. Cooperation was warmth. Survival depended on each person understanding their role, contributing heat, and respecting the power of the night. Even death could not erase the lessons. The elderly, the sick, the weak, they reminded others how fragile life was in winter. Every loss reinforced the need to prepare, to layer, to protect, to endure. In that way, human resilience was nurtured through the cold. And yet, there was beauty in it. The soft glow of fire, the weight of furs, the warmth of a shared body, the quiet rhythm of footsteps along stone corridors. All of it created a world where humans survived with courage and creativity. The cold was harsh, but it revealed the strength of life. We can learn from them. Warmth is more than temperature. It is preparation. It is ingenuity. It is cooperation. It is mindfulness of what we have and respect for what we endure. The lessons of medieval castles remind us to value the simple things we take for granted today: heat, comfort, and safety. And as we close our eyes tonight, in our modern beds with blankets, heaters, and central warmth, we can remember how people survived without any of it. They endured, they shared, they layered, and they survived. The cold was their enemy, but also their teacher, and perhaps in their stories there is a quiet warmth we can carry with us, one that doesn't rely on fire or stone, but on human resilience, care, and the art of enduring the night.